Who's out there? Let me see who's watching. Sign in. Glad to be here this morning. I'm feeling really ready to go. Ready to make some things happen. A lot on my mind. A lot of good things on my mind. A lot of good stuff happening. Oh my God, you guys. Are you all in social environment? I started looking at the letters that you wrote to yourself, to your future self. I'll tell you what, I've only read like 3 or 4 of them, and I know that you're asking me and texting me if I've received them. Most likely I have. So if I haven't, I'll let you know in about a week or so, and then you can submit it. Don't worry about those kind of details. Now, much more worried about in your future, much more. Hey, Raina, Mariana, Raul, what's going on? Good morning, you all. Much more interested in what's going to happen to you long term than whether or not you turn in an assignment on time. Yeah, Rosa, I like them to be on time, but am I going to get over it? Sure I am. But what I'm looking at is really interesting. Some of you that I have read are really, I'm trying to get these glasses right. Nicole, good morning. What I have read is how the pandemic is really starting to affect you, and a few of you have mentioned, the protests and everything else that's taking place. And I've been doing a lot of thinking. I'm a lot older than you are, probably. I'm, 54 years old. I'm sitting back here chilling, just looking at the world. But I remember the similarities going back to the 90s, with the Rodney King incident. I remember the situation back in the 70s. You don't remember the 70s at all. I remember the protests and the riots back in the late 60s. My first memory, if you read Dear Mama, you're probably not that deep into it yet. But my first real memory, Yaritza, good morning. My first memory was the day that Martin Luther King got assassinated. I was only 2 years old, but Irma Jean, who was Mama Green's daughter, she was pretty heavy. She weighed about 350 pounds and was a very strong woman, very hilarious, but she was also a disciplinarian. And I can remember that morning, I just remember the radio was playing. We just had a radio where the antenna was made out of a coat hanger. Angelica, good morning. And we heard on the radio that Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and Irma Jean fell to the floor in the kitchen. Ironically, it's the exact same spot in the kitchen where my mother tried to murder me some 13 years later. It's also the exact same spot where 13 and a half years after that, Irma Jean tried to murder my mother right in front of me. Good morning, Emily. Right in front of my eyes. And it was all in that same spot in the kitchen. But I remember when she fell to her knees, I was confused because I was a little kid. She's crying, and here's Irma Jean crying. I'm all frazzled. And I said, what's wrong? I couldn't even speak really, but I'm crying myself. I'm like, why is Irma Jean crying? And Mama Green explained to me she had a calendar of Martin Luther King in her bedroom, just a little calendar. Andrea, good morning. Just a little calendar on the wall of Martin Luther King. And my mom took me over to her house, and she took me in the back bedroom, and she said, that's the man who died today. And, my little Laura, good morning. Ashley, hello. I'm glad to see you all here. She said, that's the man who died. And as I learned later, I have a dream speech. Isabella, Alejandro, Kevin, gosh, man, we have a full house. I am so excited. I'm so excited. And I have a lot of interesting things to talk about. Sarah, hey Sarah, what's happening? And when all that was going on back in the late 60s and through the 70s, it was really a time of both turmoil, but it was also a time of uplift. People who were similarly situated in terms of social class, race, what have you. We congregated together, we mobilized together, and even though the social environment was going through tremendous change, tremendous breakdown, Jessica, good morning, we banded together, and I remember it being a time of uplift, even though it was one of the most dangerous times in American history. The homicide rate was moving upward towards 10.2 per 100,000. Right now it's sitting at 5.2 per 100,000, and it's just coming off if it's an nadir, which means it's low, which was 4.4 per 100,000 about 3 years ago. And we're going to talk a little bit about murder today. We're going to talk about social environment. We're going to talk about protests. We're going to talk about social mobility, the American dream, and Isabet. I want to say it right. I'm so sorry if I don't. But we're going to talk about these things. And what I'm going to weave together today is taking a look at the anatomy of a protest. How do economics, social mobility, and inequality pull together to create a context, a social context? Think in terms of that picture with the institutions, right? Economic, political, education, family, etc. Think of those as working together to create the context that we live in now. And with us being historical beings, hopefully you've watched the videos from last week, Who Am I, the Who Am I video. Not just the short one, which was an exercise for you to imagine how you fit into the social system, but the longer one, which was the follow-up lecture for the whole entire class, all 4 classes of mine, was something that we all were going to cover in the class anyhow, so I just made one video. But if you take a look at the phone's ringing. Hold on a second. I don't even know who that is. Sorry. If you're a student of mine, you're just now calling me. I didn't mean to hang up on you. I'm not trying to be rude, but we're in class, right? So phone's off. Although I'm keeping my on for texting purposes. In any case, we're going to take a look at these issues today. One of the changes I want to make in class for this Sunday, because it looks like everyone got their paper in. If you didn't, we'll deal with that later. But what I want to do this weekend for Sunday, right, is I forget that we're only 5 full weeks, and in the 6th week I'm grading everything so I can submit your grades in week 6. So in 5 weeks things are going to move really quickly. So what I want to do is I want you to view a movie. It's called The Two Escobars, and I'm going to actually write it down here real quick. I have notes in front of me. I never use notes, but today I'm going to, which is a rare event, so I don't know if it's a treat or not, but it is what it is. The movie I want you to watch is called The Two Escobars. And if any of you, and you can find it on YouTube, I think it's like to rent, it's like $3.99 or something like that. It used to be free on YouTube, but then they got smart and said, well, we can rent it out and stuff like that. But what you're going to find is that the movie is absolutely fascinating. And those of you who are from Colombia, are any of you have family roots back in Colombia? Because this movie really is about the rise of the national soccer team. All right, Laura. The movie is about the rise of the national soccer team in parallel with the rise of Pablo Escobar. And the reason I'm bringing that up, and I showed it in my social environment class, so it's timely. But the reason I bring that up is, if you recall, at the period after which Pablo Escobar had been assassinated. Hey, Mariana. Muñeca. Gosh, I'm sorry if I didn't say that correct, but good morning. If you recall, when he got assassinated, there were protests all over the country, especially in Medellin. And so when I look at that movie, and you're going to see the parallels, you're going to see parallels between what took... All right, okay, Isabella, Albany, all right. Nice seeing you all this morning. By the way, just a side note, if you all would like to, I accept friend requests on Facebook, because I've had 20,000 students, and I've lost touch with so many of them, and 2-3 years down the road, I like to hear what's going on in your life. The reason I teach isn't for me. I mean, I get paid and everything, but the reason I teach is really for you. And every once in a while, like for example, yesterday I got a text message from a guy named Vladimir, which is the coolest name ever. Okay, Nicole, thank you. Vladimir Charlemagne. And I had him in class 5 or 6 years ago on North Campus, and he calls and he writes, "Good morning, Rhodes." He calls and writes and he says, "Thanks for changing my life." And I got an email probably about a year ago. A guy from 1989 wrote to me and said, "You changed my life." I don't remember who he is, but it was nice to hear. So what I've been doing lately is I realized, what, I'm getting older. What are you going to do? Fire me? ISA. So I'd like to have, if you want to, you can friend request me on, Facebook, or I'm called the Hope Warrior 1 on Instagram. So feel free, because I'd like to see what happens to you. We spend all this time together, and I want to see your greatness. As I get older, really what really keeps me driving forward are my 2 daughters and what happens to my students. And I always wish greatness for all of you. Like I said, when you list those 25 items of who you are, if you're not putting down great first, then you're not looking at yourself for who you are. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. But you're going to love, oh my God, this movie is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. But it's very parallel with what we see happening today. I have a former student of mine from 2009. Here, you want me to write it again? I'll write it again, Laura. I have a student of mine who I actually consider a friend. He had 3 of his cousins in protests in Louisville, Kentucky, that got murdered last week. And he's trying to deal with that, and I'm trying to help him out. And based upon that, I see this stuff, it's very real. But it's very parallel with what happened in the 1960s and what happened in Colombia after the assassination of Pablo Escobar. And the reason I keep bringing up this idea that there are parallels, look, when we talk about who am I in that video, and what a freak show. I'm sorry. My name on Instagram. Okay. Sorry. I thought you meant my name on the name of the movie again. I said, nah, I thought I wrote that down. How do you spell warrior? Oh my God, I can't believe it. Hope Warrior 1. Okay. You ever sit by yourself and you're the only one in the room and you're laughing? No one there to laugh. It makes you feel a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you know what I'm saying? Hope Warrior 1. And when I'm looking at this idea that there are parallels across time, excuse me, and across space, right? When there are parallels across time and across space with behaviors and outcome, what that means is that events are structural, right? There are structural forces that shape events similarly across time and over time and across space. So the idea that what happened in the 1960s in the United States and what happened in Colombia, what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in the United States currently, means that these events are structural in force. So what I want you to do with this paper is I want you to look up 3 more theories, all right? I gave you some theories and some terms to look up over the week. I hope you did that. You don't have to write anything, but it's really for your knowledge. Since we're not using a textbook, my job is still to give you the equipment that you need to move forward, okay? So here's 3 theories that I want you to look up for this movie. One is called dependency theory, modernization. I'm typing this out for you. Modern Hope Warrior. Jeez. God dog it. World systems theory. World systems theory. Alright, I want you to look those up, okay? Now while you watch this movie, The Two Escobars, I want you to take a look at what was the underlying force that was the driver for the violence, was the driver for the parallels between the two Escobars, okay? Was it economic forces? Was it political forces? Was it, and I think it was, I mean, it's not in the movie, but it is kind of, when they talk about drug interdiction in Colombia by the United States, which actually changed my college roommate's life forever. He was supposed to go to Bogota in 1985 for an off-campus study program. And kid was from inner city Baltimore. The week before he came to Denison, which is where I went to undergrad, the week before he was held at gunpoint with a semi-automatic weapon. He and 7 of his friends outside of a cemetery on a street in Baltimore. The guy pulls out the gun, starts firing. He jumped, and he was a really athletic dude. He was about 5'6", but he was a muscle. No, that's embarrassing. Don't do that either. Poof! He was a muscle man, and he doesn't remember. He just blacked out, jumped over the fence, and ran away and didn't get shot. Now he never looked up to see if any of his friends had been murdered either. But as it went down, he was an inner city kid from Baltimore. He grew up in North Miami, up in Miami Gardens. His grandmother raised him there, and then he moved up to Baltimore. And he spoke fluent Spanish because he had the Miami roots. And Denison was actually molding him to become an international diplomat. And that summer, he was supposed to do an off-campus study program that summer and fall in Bogota. And it just so happened that all travel was cut when the interdiction crisis took place, when we started going into the labs and going into the fields and trying to destroy the coca cultivation production. So when we were trying to destroy that, there was no travel to Colombia. And as it turned out, he dropped out of school and he never returned, which was a tragedy because Duke he was a brilliant guy. He was super muscular. He used to think of himself as Marky Mark. He had that ripped up stomach, and he said, what did he call him? Funky Bunch. Whatever his name was, Marky Mark. So that connection between what was happening in Colombia and its impact in the United States and how we lived. That's what you call a world systems theory, right? So what takes place in India has an effect on what's taking place with you. What's taking place in China has a direct effect on what's happening to you. What's happening in North Florida is the same what's happening to you. So what that really means is that we're connected over time and space. The term, if you want to have it, is called time-space distanciation. Let me write it down. I keep moving my notes and stuff. Hold on a second. It's called time-space distanciation. And what that simply means is the world is getting smaller, right? So, for example, we're holding a class, real time, instantaneously, all over the city. Conceivably, we could be anywhere in the world right now in this class, right? Real time, which means the distance between time and space is infinitesimally small at this point in time. However, let's say, and I don't have a girlfriend right now, but let's say I broke up, all right? But let's say I wanted to send my former girlfriend a letter, and the year is 1300, and let's say she lives in, I don't know, Rome, Italy. Well, if I had to get her a letter from, well, Miami wasn't cultivated yet, we'll say from Roanoke, Virginia, and I wrote a letter to her, I'd have to take the letter by horse to the port, then the port would have to ship it across the seas, and maybe about 3 or 6 months later she would get this letter. Then for her to respond, oh, I love you, how the light twinkles when I look into your eyes, and she reads this and she says, oh, he's so lovely. So she sends a letter back, and I get the letter 6 months later, so it takes 1 whole year for me to say I love you, right? Now we say it real time, instantaneously, and you have all these dating websites, and you don't even have to see a person. All you have to do is look at some words on a screen, and boom, time and space no longer have an impact, which means everything is real time. This is why everything has to happen in our lives so quickly. It's because our expectations of success, our expectations of having stuff is instantaneous, right? And there's some problems with that. So anyhow, getting back to it. Dang, we're almost 20 minutes in. I haven't even started class yet. Well, it's typical. You'll get used to it. I hope to have some of you, by the way, in my live classes in the fall, because that's where I really excel. But in any case, when we take a look at Colombia, the United States, time and space, what we find is there are underlying structural forces that create the conditions that we see similar behavior no matter what or who is sitting into the context, right? That's how we know things are structural. That's how we know things are patterned. It's also how we know that social institutions shape the life that we live. When we understand that social institutions shape, hey Emily, when we understand that social institutions shape our lives, when we later try to solve social issues and social problems. Hey Samuel, oh, you're back for another class. Samuel came into my class last night and now he's back again, what is this morning. Good seeing you, Samuel. When you understand that institutions shape the way in which we live, then you can target your policies and your solutions to issues at the institutional level, right? Good morning. Otherwise, here's what we do. We come up with solutions based upon our common sense, and our common sense typically is wrong. And why is common sense typically wrong? Well, if you take a look at where the roots of common sense are derived from, right? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Well, I'm just gonna keep going on. If we get cut off, just view the recording in YouTube, and I'll go, or in Blackboard, and I'll put the link in there. I'm getting some kind of error message. But common sense is based upon what? Your experience with people who are similar to you in terms of their social location in the social system. It's based upon what you pull out of the news, out of the media, right? Because it's impossible for us to manage and to pull out all information. It's impossible for us to process everything. I mean, right now, my air conditioner just turned off, the microphone over here is beeping, I got an error message here, phone's over here, this phone's over here, I got the windows over here, this blind thing, or this divider behind me, a whiteboard up here. If I'm paying attention to all this information simultaneously, I'm going to be a confused wreck. So instead, I'm just focused right here on this screen, right? Here's the camera, the screen I'm watching to make sure that it's still visible and everything is clear. That's why I keep looking to the right. So what we do is, instead of trying to digest all information, we select the piece of information that reinforces what we already believe, right? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we look for things that supports what we believe, and then it confirms that our belief is correct, then what happens? It fulfills our prophecy. So when we have word of mouth experience, plus the use of media and politics, when those three things combine, it creates a common sense. And it just so happens, when you have enough people who share a similar social construction, which means we negotiate meaning with one another. We're in a constant negotiation of meaning, right? We use words to describe how we feel, the connections that we have with one another. We use language to both external talk and self-talk, right? So the language we use with one another constructs for us the nature of our relationship. But also, we don't often talk about it. The way we talk to ourselves, our self-talk, also constructs our identity. So when we talk to each other, that constructs for us our sense of self. When we talk internally, that constructs our identity. So our life, we spend the whole entire life trying to unify ourself with our identity. And the more able we are to do that, the smoother life becomes, right? So, our common sense, which is derived from institutional forces, but it is learned through socialization and through interaction. What that does is it places us into the social institutions in which we live, or it places us in our small group relationships. Why is that important? What that means is that we're constantly in process of becoming who we are. We're never completely a self. Our identity is constantly emerging because the nature of our relationships always change. And as long as society continues to change, then what's going to happen is you have to adapt to societal change. And since society is going through the most massive shift in human history, right, you are also shifting, and some of us are getting lost, some of us are getting confused. When there's a breakdown in those institutions, right, and there's a feeling of normlessness, we don't know exactly what to do. What that is called anomie. I'll write it down. Hold on a second. It's called anomie, which is, it didn't write down, which is a functionalist term derived from Emile Durkheim, which you should have looked up. But in any case, that's the term. That's where there's breakdown. When there's breakdown, that's when you start to see crime, you start to see protests, you start to see arguing, you'll see a rise in interpersonal crime, domestic violence, you'll see a rise of street crime. Because why? Because social order is breaking down. There's a sense of anomie, right? So the book I'm writing right now, by the way, I do apologize to you. Some of you texted me on Sunday and on Saturday. I get so many texts and emails, about 100 a day. And so I didn't answer all of you, and I do apologize. But I'm working on that book that we keep talking about. I have to finish it on Friday. I've written about 30, 40 pages. I got about 90 to write. And the way I can do it, the reason I know I can do it is because that little video I made for you on how to write a great paper, I use the exact same thing moving forward. Well, the book is called Hard Knocks, Sports Participation and the Reduction of Violent Crime. And it's based upon the work of Derek Lester, who is the president, CEO, and founder of the Hard Knocks Foundation down in Homestead. Right? And essentially what he does is he works with football players who play football. And he brings them into training, he gives them mentoring, he takes them to colleges so that they can visit these universities, because you know Miami is a hotbed for recruiting. So all these scouts and agents, or not agents, that's illegal, but recruiters are coming down to Miami, Homestead, etc., to recruit these players up to Alabama, up to Georgia, up to Ohio State, Muck Michigan. I hope they don't get anyone from Miami, because I do not like Michigan. I'm an Ohio State guy, Buckeye born, Buckeye bred, baby. When I die, Buckeye dead. And don't even throw the Wolverines at me. We'll have to scrap. We'll have to scrap. I can't. Oh God, I'm getting a little bit tense right now just thinking about it. But in any case, what he does is he pulls these kids off the streets, because back when he opened in 2007, 2008. He had called these two young men to come in and say, hey, why don't you come get some training? They said, no, we're good. And about 5 minutes later, both had been gunned down on a street corner down in Homestead. And so what I started doing is I'm taking a look at what's going on in terms of violent crime in Homestead and Florida City. And, well, on the one hand, it's really complicated. Because I only look at homicide. I don't look at robbery when I'm analyzing crime. I don't look at it at all because it's not accurately measured. The only accurately measured crime is homicide. That's the only one, because if someone comes up dead, it's going to get reported to the authorities, right? Even if it's a cold case body, or if it's been missing for a while, or someone's dead for a while, and 3 or 4 days later you find the body, someone's reporting it because it's decomposing, what have you. So I only look at murder, and murder tells me everything I need to know about a situation. Like, for example, many of you don't know this, but the rate of homicide in the United States has been coming down for the last, since 92, since 1991, 1992. Just started going up a little bit in 2016, about 2016, but it didn't go up high. It reached a low of 4.4 per 100,000, now sitting around 5.2. But what I did was I took a look at Miami, and Miami peaked in 2014, and now, for those of you who don't know this, Miami is sitting at 9.7 per 100,000, which is the lowest it's been since the 1960s, right? So actually it's safer in Miami than it has been in a long, long time. But a lot of people who think Homestead is super dangerous, well, it is and it isn't, because the homicide rate in Homestead basically is just a little bit higher than it is nationally. It's lower than it is in Miami-Dade. It's much lower than it is in Miami. So those who are thinking Homestead is violent is really it's not violent statistically. However, when we take a look at Florida City, you have a different scenario. Florida City in 2000, let me see right here, 2010 had 0 homicides, right? So the rate was 0. Last year, there were 10 homicides 2018, there were 10 homicides in Florida City, which made it a rate of 81 per 100,000. The national average is 5, but in 2018, the rate in Florida City was 81, which makes it more dangerous in St. Louis, makes it more dangerous in Detroit, makes it more dangerous than Opelika, makes it more dangerous in Liberty City, makes it a lot more dangerous in New York City, which is sitting at around 4.9 per 100,000, makes it more dangerous in New Orleans. As a matter of fact, that 81 per 100,000, which is a huge skyrocket, because prior to that it was only 16, and the year before that it was 8. So I take a look at how does it double in 2 years, or not double, it doubled from 2016 to 17, but then it went up, right, 500% in 1 year. So I take a look at, well, why is that, right? And then I take a look at all the unrest today, and I'm saying, what are the parallels? What are the parallels with that, and what are the parallels with what took place in Colombia back in the 80s and the 90s, or even what's taking place in Venezuela at this time, right? And what is it? What is it? And I start to look at those institutions again. And then I bring to life the idea of social theory. Because without a theory, if we just use common sense, we would say, well, those people are going crazy, right? People are mad, whatever the explanation is. It's drugs, it's guns, all these different types of things. And that's okay, but that's an opinion. Because without any kind of empirical evidence, we have nothing, right? We just have a guess. And so I've been working on these numbers, and I've been trying to figure out, how do I explain homicide and violence in Homestead, and especially right now, in Florida City. And so there are 3 theories that are core theories. I'm burning up hot, right? I'm sorry, that's why I keep sweating and stuff. In Florida City, my air doesn't work properly. My landlord has to get it fixed and stuff. But in any case, oh, Ashley, it's okay. Look, here, Ashley, let me go back to it, all right? Here, the homicide rate in Homestead it peaked in 2006. It was 12 per 100,000, right? It was at a low in 2013 at 4.6 per 100,000, which made it equally as safe as any place in the nation. Then when I come down to, then it went up again in 2015 to 9.5, 9.5 per 100,000, 8.4. But all of this is lower than Miami, much lower than Miami. And it is lower on average than Miami-Dade County. So as it turns out, statistically, and now it's 5.6 per 100,000, which is basically the equivalent of what it is on average in the United States. So when we take a look at Homestead, statistically, it's not nearly as dangerous as what people say it is, okay? That doesn't mean there's not danger there. It doesn't mean there's not crime, because violent crime and I don't have the numbers on me. Violent crime in general in Homestead is higher than it is in the national average. The national average is 350 per 100,000, but it's 1,000 per 100,000 in Homestead. But in Florida City, what was the number? It was 4,000 per 100,000. So it's 10 times more dangerous statistically in Florida. I'm not knocking Florida City, all right? That's not what I'm saying. Matter of fact, I'm going to explain why the homicide rate is so high and the violent crime rate is so high in Florida City, and what we have to do about it, because I was shocked too. I'm always paying attention to stats in Miami. I'm not paying attention to Florida City, but I had to break down some numbers to get there. But before I got to the numbers, I had to come in with a theory, right? So there's three major theories that we have in sociology: conflict theory, right? Functionalism, and symbolic interaction. Conflict theory and functionalism are both structural theories. In other words, they try to explain how the institutions work and how the institutions create the context in which we behave. Symbolic interaction, what that does is it looks at how do you and I interact with one another to construct meaning in our relationship. How do you and I socially construct reality? That's what symbolic interaction does. So, the difference between functionalism and conflict theory, which are both institutional theories, right? Conflict theory, well, let's start with functionalism. Functionalism argues that all the social institutions work together to promote stability within society, right? So the economic institution, education institution, family, etc., they're all interconnected to promote stability and homeostasis within society, right? Solidarity, that's the best word, social solidarity. And there's two types of solidarity according to the functionalists. There's mechanical solidarity, and there is organic solidarity. Mechanical solidarity is for small societies that are, loose, very small societies. Usually hunting and gathering societies where there's, 50 to 150 people in the society, and there's a lot of community there, not a lot of disruption because of belief systems, what is called collective conscience. The collective conscience is shared, so things work together mechanically, so it's very smooth. In a society like ours that is so diverse and so complicated, things work together through what is called organic solidarity. It's like we have to work and we have to understand diversity in order for it to run stably. So it grows organically, right? So the more complicated societies has a much more complicated institutional system. Right? So in a society such as ours, it's very difficult to promote stability because of the fact that there's so many people, there's so many ideas, there's so many different types of consciousness. Right? So what society does is the division of labor. That's what Durkheim called it, was the division of labor. The division of labor, which is work, right, is designed to regulate behavior, to place you into the so your work promotes stability, right? Your belief system, as part of the collective consciousness, what that does is it integrates you into the system. So if your way of seeing the world is aligned with society, then your life should be very stable, right? So your collective conscience, your consciousness, right, and your part in the division of labor. Division of labor and collective consciousness work together to promote stability in society. So when there's breakdown, right, breakdown is good according to the functionalists. So with these protests that we're seeing, the functionalists would make the argument that what we're actually seeing is a breakdown in the institutional systems. So when there's crime, when there's immorality, when there's corruption, when there's all these different types of things, what that means for the functionalists is that the institutions aren't working properly. So we have to fix the institutions to get things running again. So for the functionalists, this has an integrating type of effect. It may be disruptive, but it also is going to force change to come about. And for those persons who do the protest, on the flip side, is it gives them a sense of solidarity, right? Social solidarity, and that solidarity brings them in together, and it allows them to have a collective consciousness. So if you notice, there's a lot of motion and movement within a particular situation. So when we're taking a look at the protest, it creates solidarity between the protesters, right? But it also creates chaos, or anomie, in which the institutions have to work together to change it. So I hope, let me just see by your notes here, does that make sense, what I just explained for the functionalists? Does that make sense? And for symbolic interaction? Just a quick yes would be great. I think I ran out of something to drink. That's all right. I don't need it. So while I'm waiting for that, does that make sense? Those are big theories. Right? Those are master theories. But in any case, conflict theory is another way of looking at it's not the conflict like this. It's conflict between classes. Conflict theory, which was rooted in thoughts and beliefs of Karl Marx. Karl Marx basically wrote that all things, all outcomes in society are based upon social class inequality. Excuse me. If you have any questions about the theories, just write your questions and I'll answer it. That's what I'm really good at. If you give me a question, I can answer it. So, if we take a look at social class inequality, he said there are basically two social classes. There's the capitalist class, and then there's the proletariat. Okay? The capitalist class owns and controls the mode of production, which means they own authoritative resources, which is the labor market. They own the companies, they own the economic system, they control the boards and all that kind of stuff. Then there's the allocative and authoritative resources, which is education and the media. Where does information come from? So the capitalist class controls the media, and the capitalist class controls the economic system, which means by virtue of that they control the education system, they control the religious system, the military system, which means police, and they control all the mechanisms, all the social institutions, so that the proletariats, which is the, sorry Samuel, you threw me off, which is where the proletariats reside. The proletariats, their whole purpose in life, according to conflict theory, is to work and to sell their labor to the capitalist class. So that when you go to work, now this ties right back into Florida City, right? So I'm starting to take a look at, okay, I imagine that everyone in Florida City wants the American dream for their kids, just like they do in Miami, just like they do in Coconut Grove, just like they do here in Pinecrest, just like they do in Toledo, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, Columbus, Ohio. All these places, everybody, as far as I know, wants their children to live a better life than they did. I mean, I want my kids to have a better life. The fact that I'm live streaming, you know how I did this? My daughters taught me how to do it. It took a while. It took a while to figure out how to use this stupid thing. They had to teach me how to text. Oh my God, it's so embarrassing. This WhatsApp stuff. They had to teach me how to do WhatsApp, and oh God, but now I know how to do it, and it makes a lot more sense. But my daughters taught me, and I'm a great public speaker, but I'm not so good at technology. So what's happening is that I know that they've been put in a position where they are more likely to do better than I did, right? In my lifetime, as far as economic stability and all that kind of stuff. And I've done better than my mother. My mother did better than my grandfather and her mother. She couldn't do worse. My grandmother was the most abusive human being I've ever heard of. As you read Dear Mama, you're going to see that my mother went through, what's the word I could use for it? She lived in hell. And she didn't have the ability to really, she didn't learn to care. So she could never like express her love towards me, and it, caused all kinds of issues. I had Mama Green who loved me, but what is that from, right? When we talk about this idea that we want to do better in our lifetime, right? That's called intra-mobility, intra-generational mobility. Here's the word, come on, let's see here, intra-generational mobility. Alright? That's what we're striving for. The reason you're in school, most likely, if I had the chance to ask you, why are you here? You'd say, I want a better life, I want to get a degree, I want to move on. Yes, my mom did. But she ended up being my best friend. So, Emily, it was really rough. It's had an effect on the way I see the world. It made me a better person. It made me, it made me kind of tough. It made me very resilient. So there's not much you can do to me to hurt me that I'm not going to get through. Because I lived a life of terror. You know, I didn't know which day was going to be, where it could be my last day. My mom was very loving. She was very funny. But man, there were days where she snapped and it was on. Like you can read about it. When I was in second grade, you know, I used to black out because the violence in my home was so strong and so prolific. My mother and Irma Jean used to argue every single day. And I mean, not arguing like, hey, you know what, the Buckeyes are better than Michigan. I'm talking about, oh my God, the names were horrible. The threat of physical violence was always there, and it was always over me. And then I would get threatened, and oh, geez, I'll tell you what, it was crazy. And then the sexual abuse was all through the neighborhood. Everyone was getting molested or raped or something like that. And it was so prolific in our neighborhood that us kids just thought it was normal. We said, oh, well, you know, that's what's going on. And as I grew older, I realized that a lot of the things that we saw were not normal at all. As a matter of fact, they were so profuse that it changed the direction the way I see the world and stuff like that. But it made me a sociologist, which is why I'm a sociologist, which is also the reason why I can understand such a broad array of how people behave. But back to it. So in my lifetime, you know, we were poor. I mean, we weren't like in poverty. We lived in relative poverty, not absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is where you can't meet your basic human needs because you just don't have the resources, right? And it's intergenerational. So this generation's in poverty, the next one, the next one, the next one. That is, what's that called? Oh, jeez, I forgot what I was saying. That was absolute poverty. Relative poverty is where it is temporary. You move up and you move down in terms of social class, but you don't have what everyone else has. For example, you know, like I went to a wealthy school. It was an elite school. I went to a school like Gulliver or Riviera, Miami Country Day. I went to Maumee Valley Country Day School. Oh my God! And the kid, it was great. I mean, it was a great buffer. But man, I'd come back home and I'd get off the school bus, and they would say, "Oh, here he comes, that little spoiled brat. Yeah, he goes to Monkey Vomit Country Day School." And I'm like, "Monkey Vomit? I'll go to Maumee Valley." And then, you know, there's always this social class dynamic, and people thought I was a sellout for going to this school. I mean, I was always tested. As a matter of fact, I wanted to play the piano. Right, my father was a piano player, but my mom, she got me a violin. I'm playing the violin, so I'd get off the bus, and next thing you know, these guys would beat me up because I'm playing a violin. I said, "Mom, I gotta quit. I can't be getting beat up because I play this violin." And finally, I quit. But I was a great athlete, so I was always able to mingle because of the fact that I was really good at baseball and basketball. And I was good at football, even though I'm tiny, but I had these hands. I could catch anything. In any case, intragenerational is upward mobility within your lifetime. Absolute poverty and relative. Let me put that down. Relative poverty. All right. All right. Intragenerational is upward mobility in your lifetime. I did it. Right. I went from, you know, my mom was a nurse, and nurses didn't get paid back in those days like they get paid now. It was just barely above the poverty level. With me going to Maumee Valley, that tuition ate into everything we had. And Irma Jean bought my clothes, she washed for us, and I stayed all the time with Mama Green. And Mama Green was a cook, right? So she didn't make anything. She made minimum wage, but we made it. I mean, we ate like kings. You better believe that. She had a garden. We would can all our foods, and we made all of our liquor and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, I started drinking when I was 2. It's just, you know, I was her tester. So she'd make homebrew and I'd test it, and then she'd have these parties. And at the parties, they'd pay me a dime or a quarter every time I'd take a sip. You can check it out on my Black History Month video. I tell the stories about all that kind of stuff. But my mother, she did. So that's why she sent me to Maumee Valley. She said, if he gets an education, because I don't know what would have happened to me if I went to Navarre or if I went to Eastside Central or Wade. It's probably a lot of my friends who went there, who are still dear friends to me, still live in Toledo. Now, my friends that went to Maumee Valley, none of my friends, well, that's not true. Devin Darbates live in Toledo still. Leslie Van Hee lives in Toledo. But most everybody else from Maumee Valley moved out of the state, right? Sexum Siriapa was recently the vice president of Twitter. He's not any longer. Pradip Multani, he's a cancer researcher out in San Diego, one of the top in the world. Eric lives in Colorado. Bill lives up in Connecticut. I live down here in Miami. Tracy lives up in Montana. I mean, we're all over the place and have done really well. But the people who went to Waite are still in the neighborhood. And I know this for a fact, if I had gone there, because I was very social and I knew a lot of people. For a little kid, it was amazing how many people I knew. I just knew people everywhere. My first job offer when I was 15 was to deal drugs and marijuana. And so I thought about it, and the dude gave me a $50 bill and said, hey, if you sell this bag for me, I got more money for you. I'm like, what? Are you serious? We're sitting here, I'm getting dimes and quarters from drinking, and I got a $50 bill in my hand. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to pull my hat off, but I got my bandana on today. So, see, got my bandana. So what because my hair's whacked out. I haven't had a chance to get it cut because I'm writing this book all the time. So anyhow, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, $50. I know I can sell this in about 10 minutes. But then I thought to myself, first my mother would kill me. And then when I'm laying dead, Irma Jean would kill me. Mama Green would have been disappointed, and my school would have been in disbelief. So I said, I'm not going to let all these people down. I'm not going to do it. I said, no, I'm not going to do it, bro. I'm going to just keep going to school. I don't mind being broke. I'd rather do that. And we maintained a friendship, right? But that $50 bill was going to give me access to the American dream, right? Had I not gone to that school, I'd have been still in Toledo, probably in prison. A lot of my friends went to prison. Half my neighborhood friends, not half, about a third, my neighborhood friends went to prison. None of my friends at school went to prison, even though we all engaged in similar type of behavior when we got engaged in deviant stuff. So it wasn't me, because I couldn't afford it, because if I got in trouble for deviant behavior, I'm gone. So I just said, not me, not me. So I didn't do the illegal stuff. I just played sports and went to school, but and studied and all that kind of stuff. Now, I had a role with the street gang, but I won't discuss that, not here today. But for me to go from there, my mother wanted me to go from that neighborhood in Toledo to a better life. That is what you call intergenerational. Intergenerational mobility. However you spell it. That is where you do better than your family did before you, right? That's the American dream. The American dream is based upon the premise that you will do better than your parents. You will move up in terms of the social class ladder, right? There's geographical mobility, social mobility, where you change into a different social class. There's a thing called hidden injuries of class. And what's amazing, and this happened to me, as I moved up in terms of like income level and wealth level and stuff like that to a higher quote-unquote social class, I still had the mentality from my East Toledo upbringing. I still had an inner city mindset, but I had a private school mindset, and there's this thing called status incongruity. Oh God, I better write this down. Hold on a second. It's called status incongruity. Congruity, which is where you experience moving up, but you still hold on to your roots and your belief systems from the past. So a lot of these professional athletes that you see that become super wealthy, but they lose everything, a status incongruity. They weren't mentally prepared to get into that big money, so when they got the big money, they fell back into their old habits, took care of their boys, took care of their friends, their posse, and everything else, and in doing so, they spent everything that they had. That status incongruity, and I experienced it. It's really tough, because I will never turn my back on someone from the social class from which I came, right? I will never do it. I have as many street gang friends now as I do CEOs of companies. I'm not judgmental. I never judge. I never hate. So in this sense, I've never quite moved up in terms of social class, in terms of this. I'm capable because I have the language system to, converse across class lines. But at the same time, I still hold on to that East Toledo mentality, which I've tried to shake it. I just can't. And that's that incongruity. However, I have done better economically than my mother, so I live the American dream. All right? But there's a form of mobility that nobody looks at, right? And it's called structural mobility. Structural mobility is where people move up and down the social class ladder because the institutions in society changed. When coronavirus hit, right? And all these businesses closed down, then all of a sudden, within a month, 32 million people lost their job. They didn't control it. Now, one of those individuals made the decision, you know what, I'm going to destroy the economic institution so that I can get displaced. Doesn't work that way. The institutions changed, forced all those people out into unemployment. Then what happened was, they weren't taught how to save, right? So they didn't have enough, they didn't have 3 months of income or wealth put aside, so they became dependent upon an unemployment check, and they were dependent upon a stimulus check. Why? Because, and this is Marx, those who control education and the economic system don't want you to know how to invest. They don't want you to know how to grow your own capital. What they want you to see, there's two kinds of capital. There's capital that appreciates in value, and then there's capital that depreciates, or you can call property. Property that appreciates in value, property that decreases in value. When you go buy that car, it's a piece of property. The value decreases the moment you drive it off the parking lot, right? But if you buy a business, if you own a business, I don't know, Baxter Health, right? It increases wealth and it goes back into your pocket as a shareholder, right? So most of us are not taught to invest in a company so we can get passive returns. You're not taught how to develop passive streams of income. I have at least 3 or 4 passive streams of income. I have money coming in from all kinds of directions. Now, this is not passive teaching this class because I work for Miami-Dade College. But my part-time job at Primerica, yes, I get passive income there. The book is passive income. I have passive income in my returns in the stock market, right? I make my investment and then it grows without me doing anything. And so I have these passive forms, but you're not taught that. Because if you have passive income, stuff that comes to you without you working, right? That's the beauty of YouTube. And those people who make money, you know, they game. They're playing gaming systems, like my kids do games, but they put it on YouTube and they get paid for it. That's passive, right? The reason they don't want you to understand the idea of passive income is simply for the fact that they want you to sell their labor to them. Now, when all of a sudden all these businesses go under, you lose your job and you fall in social class. That's structural mobility. That's where the actual structure of society has changed, pushing more people down in the social class ladder, right? So, what is structural mobility all about? We like to say that outsourcing has destroyed the labor market. We like to blame illegal immigrants for our economic situation. Forget about it. It's structural mobility. The change in the use of computer technology has changed the workforce since 1995. The advent and the rise in 1996, 7, 8 of the internet, it changed the way in which everything is done. We couldn't have even imagined having a class like this back in 1995 when I started. It wasn't even possible. Online learning came around 1997, 1998, and it was nothing but a shell, right? It wasn't even filled with anything informative. Now it's so hard to do an online class because there's so much information packed in there that you have to know, because you have to read every single thing. Exactly, Ashley. Now, I'm going to teach you this stuff, though. I'm going to make a video on the side. I'm going to teach you how to invest and how to grow your money, how to develop passive income, because my job, my perspective is to show you, at least introduce you to these concepts that you can take control of your life, and you must take control of your life. And here's, I'm going to tell you why. Do you realize that in terms of social class, your generation and my generation, on average, has done worse than the generation before? We're the only generation, going back to 1776, where this current generation did worse in terms of median income than the generation before. As a matter of fact, our income, our spending power, is 30% less than it was in 1984, 1985. And if you take a look at what's happened since the year 2000 or the year 2010, the average income of an American, including myself, between the age of 45 and 54 has decreased by 14%, right? Why? Because the structure of the labor force has changed. Not because I said, you know what, I like working so much that I want you to do is pay me less. Will you do that? Thank you. Thank you for decreasing my income by 10 or 14%. So what do we see? We see people struggling more day by day. Are we the ones that decided that rent in Miami should be so high? Did you say, you know what, I like my apartment so much, why don't you go ahead and increase it by 100% over the next 10 years? Double what I pay for rent from $600 to $1,200 for this one room, right? Or I want to live in Brickell. Why don't you go ahead and charge me $3,000 for a one-bedroom apartment because I want to live on Brickell Avenue? Did you say that? No. Does it affect us? Yes. Because where we want to live isn't based upon what we work for. It's based upon the structure of the institutions within Miami. Now, what's going on down in Florida City? This is what's happening in Florida City. The average income, the median income, household income in the United States is $63,000 a year. I don't have the table in front of me. But in Florida City, the median income is $23,000 a year. The most prolific, yeah, Durkheim, thank you. The most prolific job in Florida City is food services, right? The services, 36% work in that industry, in the services industry. Maintenance, waste refuse, food, etc., right? Poverty. The rate of poverty in Florida City, check this out. The rate of poverty is 43%. So you have a labor market that is, on average, earning 1/3 of what the national average is. You have an unemployment rate for those persons between 16 and 19 years old, right? Between 16 or under the age of 25. Those under the age of 20, yes, Ashley. Those under the age of 25, 46% are unemployed, right? So this unemployment pushes down on persons on everyday life. The low wage structure pushes down. So if you're living in that structural condition in Florida City, when you have great inequality like you have, and the high school graduation rate is, I think, what was it, 55% in Florida City? So the rate of poverty when you live, when you have less than a high school degree is much higher than if you have a bachelor's degree. As a matter of fact, 0% of the people with a bachelor's degree in Florida City, 0% live in poverty, right? I think less than high school, I don't have the numbers in front of me, is something like 53%, right? So let's take a look at it. If we're taught the American dream from the very beginning of life and how to move up in the social system, but the structures of our community don't permit it, Marx would say that those persons who want to move up but can't move up are alienated from the workforce, which means they're detached from it. They have no control over it. And when you become alienated from the workforce, you become alienated from society, right? And alienation leads to anger. When you see that homicide rate explode the way it does, what that suggests is that there's a massive shift in the institutions of the community expressed as anger, and boom, the homicide rate goes up. Now be careful how we look at homicide, because there were 10 homicides in Florida City in 2018. 10, it's not a huge number. But when you only have 12,000 people living there, the rate is 80 per 100,000. When we take a look at the economic situation, and it's very simple to see. You have this convergence, right, of these institutional forces that weigh down upon individuals. When you're taught to be masculine in a competitive environment, and somebody questions your identity, somebody questions your sense of self, that alienation expresses itself as anger, and boom, you see people take each other out. This is the reason why, by the way, if you take a look at homicide, when you take a look at patterns of homicide, the number one type of murder is friends killing friends, right? In other words, there's an emotional explosion, boom, take each other out. Number two, for people who know each other. Number two is husbands killing wives, right? In other words, that anger within that family system. It expresses itself through the alienation, where we define the other person as our enemy. Rather than saying that it is the structural conditions that created this situation. And under these structural conditions, we are not taught how to be entrepreneurial, to step outside the system in which we live. We're not taught to be lifelong learners. We're not taught to be investors. We're not taught to save. And the reason is we're not taught those things because of the fact that we have to sell our labor to somebody else. Now we take a look at this political unrest. You want to understand why people are protesting. The reason they're protesting is because the institutional system is weighing down upon people. So when Floyd gets murdered by the police, it symbolizes the alienation that has been experienced over time. And the police, from a conflict perspective, represent that social institution that is there to protect the economic institution, the educational institution, etc., etc. So they become the icon of the institutions to maintain the status quo for the wealthy, while at the same time, the persons who are getting weighed down upon by those institutions, particularly when you add in the issue of race, is historically based. So what you're really looking at is this downward structural mobility where the institutions are weighing down upon individuals. Those individuals experience the alienation from the weight, but they can't explain it as the weight weighing down from societal forces. So what they do, and this is all social environment, right? So what they do is they express their anger outwardly at the icon of the controller. And that's what you have, right? That's what you have. So when we take a look at all these issues, the anatomy of a protest, I am an economic determinist. I'm not a political determinist. And I believe that the economic system predicts the direction of behavior. And here's my greatest concern. The reason why the protests bother me, well, they bother me in and of themselves, right? Because I don't like what I saw on the news. I understand the socio-historical forces that have led to this moment. But the reason it bothers me even more is that what I'm watching is the social breakdown on the margins, all right? All this alienation that's coming up is being developed because of structural immobility and forcing down in terms of social class of the masses of people. This is why I teach now, because really I want to run my company, I want to do that. That's really where my hopes and dreams lie. But the reason I stay in the classroom is simply for this. I am going to be the one that's going to teach you that you need to take control of your life. You need to build your team. And I talk about it every class period. You need to find those persons who are going to support you, believe in you, love you, respect you, because there's plenty of people who won't. And as long as you leave them in on your team, they're going to bring you down, that sense of self, that identity. They're going to bring you down. If you're in an abusive relationship and you need to help get out, you give me a call. You got my phone number. I'll help you get out, right? If you're looking at suicidal types of thoughts and suicidal tendencies, the reason is the same reason why people protest. The protest is externalized towards the institutions, but suicidal is where the institutions weigh upon us and we blame ourselves and we point that anger back inside rather than outside. So protest is, stream analysis says that we're all in the same stream. These structural forces shape us all. It is whether or not we externalize it, where we express our anger outwardly, or if we internalize it, the locus of control is internal, and we direct it towards ourselves. Suicide and homicide are the expressions of the same exact forces, right? Those same structural forces. So if you're in that boat, man, you give me a call. You're not alone in this. My book's Semicolon. That's what it's about. Dear Mama is about the things that happened to me. Semicolon is about the stuff that happened within me. And then A Mother Cries is how I pulled together lethal violence, homicidal violence with suicidal violence, and called it, looked at lethal violence in A Mother Cries. A Mother Cries, Lethal Violence in the Zombie Apocalypse is what that's called. Right? And I'm going to be actually talking about that tonight in my human behavior class, which, of course, at 6:40, you can tune in if you like to. A lot of the stuff is going to be similar. However, right, who out here is teaching you life? We're teaching you concepts. We're helping you take a test. But I really want you to take a look at you. That first assignment, who am I? The letter to yourself. The second assignment, to look at the two Escobars and use one of those theories to explain it. Or you can use conflict, functionalism, symbolic interactionism, dependency, modernization theory, or world systems theory. You use whatever is best for you and find the issue that you think is most interesting. All right. But the reason I'm having you do that is by using a theory to explain that movie. You're learning how to use theory to explain your own life. And when you understand how theory is tied to trends, then you're going to be able to put yourself in the trend so that you can adapt to the changes that are coming down the road. That's all I care about. The reason I teach these things is so you can make the adaptation. And ultimately, every one of you should have life insurance, especially at this age. Well, I'm not going to die. I'm young. It's not because you're going to die. It's because someday you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, or you might have a child, and right now is the least expensive time to get it. And if you don't get married or have a child, if some accident does happen, then they can give you respect as you depart, because there's accidents every day. You know, my bus stop, I went to get a Coke Zero over on 88th Street and 107th, 112th over by MDC on Kendall campus. I go in and get a Coke Zero, lady does a U-turn, guy going 65 down 88th Street, doesn't see her in time, hits that car, bounces off the light pole, takes out my bus stop, crashes into a tree. Gone. He didn't predict that day. And had I been sitting on that seat at that moment instead of getting a Coke Zero, I'd have been wiped out. I couldn't have got out of the way of a 60-mile-an-hour car coming. It'd have been the end. It's not that I predicted to go. No one predicts that it's their time, but we don't protect ourselves and those who are around us. So that's one thing I would do. Build your foundation using that. Then get your debts. Man, you shouldn't have any debts at your age. Get rid of the credit card. All right. Buy a cheaper card, one that you can pay in cash. And instead of paying credit debt, take the money that you spend on credit debt and invest it into the stock market. Have 3 months of savings set aside, so if something happens, you lose your job, what have you, you got 3 months you can take care of yourself, and then you start investing. And the reason you invest is not for now, it's for later. So that you can live, if it's time for you to invest in your own company, you got the money there. Right? When it comes time for you to retire, at your age, if you put away $250 a month and you get a 10% return until you're 65, you'll have roughly $1.8 million to retire on. $250 may sound like a lot, and it is, but as you get older, it's not a lot. So if you go from 20 to 40 years old and you put away $250 a month, never put anything in after 40, you're going to have $1.8 million. Why don't we want you to know that? Because we want you to work for the system. And when the system changes, you become dependent upon it. And the problem is that when it changes, we see one another as the enemy rather than one another as similarly situated. And what I believe, Mama Green taught me this, we are more similar than we are different. It is society that is common sense. Politics, word of mouth, and experience that teaches us that we are more different than we are the same. I have the exact opposite perspective. I have the sociological imagination, which means I can see myself from the perspective of other. And I can see you from the perspective of other. And if I can step outside of me and try to see the world from your lens, then I have much better understanding. It's called empathetic understanding. When you can see the world from the view of others, it's called empathetic understanding. And why is it important? I'll tell you why. Because when we come up with policies to deal with economic strain, when we come up with policies to deal with violence, when we come up with policies to do something about teenage pregnancy, we always take it from the perspective of the policymaker, not of the persons who are in the system, who are affected by that structure, right? Oh, does that all make sense? Right? So if we take a look at it, doesn't matter what it is, protest, economic dislocation, etc., then what we're really looking at are those structural forces that weigh in on people. And we either respond from anomie or we respond because of alienation, right? So when we take a look at these things on the news, don't look at the news. Look at it from the view of other and look at it as a structural situation. The more you learn how to do that, the more you're going to be able to get control of your life. And ultimately, that's my whole purpose for teaching, is so that you can have your life. And you can live independently and have a quality of life that's higher or better than your own parents, right? So that you can create a condition for your children. By the way, when you have a child, you put $5,000 in that baby's name in a mutual fund, diversified mutual fund. And if it gets a 10% return, you'll never have to give that child money again, and that $5,000 by the time they're 65 will have grown to about $2.5 million, right? One investment, 10% return is called the time value of money. Money has value in the future if you allow it to grow, right? That's your passive income. You can change your child's life and your grandchildren's life with that one investment. It is my job to introduce you to ideas that you may or may not have had yet in your past or your recent past. Build your team, see yourself as great, and start to develop a strategy to build your financial house. You do those things, you're going to have a quality of life of the top 5%. You got to work for it, you got to be disciplined, and you got to be diligent, and you got to believe. Every day, if you take a step in that direction, it will happen. But if it seems too far away, and you put it aside, it won't happen. My advisor, Len Jordan, at Denison University, he used to say, Sean, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But if you do know where you're going, only a few will. In other words, see where you're going, build a strategy, and execute. You do that, you're going to live a great life. If you don't, you're still going to live a good life, but you're going to get blown around. And with the structural change that's coming forth with artificial intelligence and the digital economy and robotics, you can't predict the direction that it's going to blow you. So you might as well go ahead and create your own situation, your own business. Start thinking about this by the year 2040 or is it 2030. 40% of the American population is going to be working for themselves. Our education system doesn't teach you how to work for yourself, does it? In 2040, you're most likely going to have to work for yourself. So you got to get ready. All right. Raina, I teach human behavior. This semester I'm also teaching multi-ethnicity. I'm teaching social problems. In the fall I teach this social environment, I think criminology, human behavior on Kendall campus, and a few other ones. But I'd love to have, oh my gosh, I'd love to have you all in my real life class. Do you all have any questions that I can answer? Because I knew I was going off today, baby. I knew I was going. Because structure is really important, and that's what social environment is. There's those that shape us, right? Do you all have any questions for me pertaining to, and I'm going to put into Blackboard the announcement of what your new assignment's going to be. I'll formalize it. I'll probably write it up tomorrow. What is today? Is today Tuesday? I'll write it up so that you'll know what you're looking at, and there won't be any problems. All right. Anyone have any more questions? All right. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that after we move on from this semester, you can continue to learn, because I'm going to continue to do my thing. I'm getting more comfortable with how to manage, the production of it all. I'm going to start doing the 10-minute videos, everything else. So please. Oh, do you want me to explain it, Emily? It's real simple. You're going to pick an issue from the movie The Two Escobars, right? And say, like, political corruption, right? And so what you're going to take a look at is political corruption using a dependency perspective or a conflict perspective. That's all you're going to do. You might take a look at, sports and inequality. You might take a look at poverty. You might take a look at housing. You might take a look at the value of the underworld in maintaining stability in society, because Pablo Escobar had a huge impact on social class. So all you're going to do is take some kind of issue that arises in that movie, protest, whatever, and then you're going to use a theory to explain it. That's it. I only want a page, one to 2 pages at most. So if you go back and watch the video, what's it called? How to Write a Great Paper. I want you to have an introduction, a conceptual one. So I wrote a conceptual introduction in that paper. I gave you concepts today: mobility, intergenerational, structural mobility, relative poverty, absolute poverty. In that opening paragraph, you want to use concepts to frame what you're going to discuss, right? And the last sentence of the first paragraph should read, "This paper is therefore designed," and this is in the example so you can see it. "This paper is therefore designed to analyze the relationship between what? Sunday. Emily, let's do Sunday. Oh, Angelica, you liked it? Thank you. You're welcome. I love doing these. I love doing the live presentations. What is GC? Did you guys ever do the GC? What does GC stand for, Jessica? What is GC? I used to think LOL was lots of love, so that's, if that tells you anything that I know. When I kept saying, man, LOL, lots of love, I said, that doesn't quite make sense, but okay, lots of love to you too. What is GC? GC. Oh, group chat. Oh, okay. Oh God. Include me. Will you all include? I feel so dumb sometimes. Will you all include me on the group chat? My number is 305-755-2579. Hey, thanks for your participation today. Feel free to text me. I'm going to be looking at your. I'm going to be taking a look at your little papers. Wish me luck in writing this book. I'm going to go get some lunch and come back and write until 6 o'clock. So I'll spend 4 hours writing. Yeah, LMFAO, me too, Emily. Dumb. GC. Okay, all right. LOL. There's all kinds of those things. I don't even know what any of them are. Okay. You all, I'm going to sign off. You were great today. I wish it was live. Have a beautiful day. Thanks, Emily. I appreciate you all supporting me like that. Oh, God. All I do now is watch My Hero Academia with my daughters. And when we don't do that, we're playing, we like to battle on Mario Smash Bros, right? And I'm always Meta Knight, and they love the fact that Dad mixes it up with them. So I'm kind of stuck with Deku. I don't know if you watch My Hero Academia, but Deku's my boy. I still know all the Pokemon. Oh, it's just not, it's ridiculous. So in any case, I got to go eat some lunch, write for a few hours, and I got to do class tonight. Feel free to join if you want to. It's all good. Thank you, Emily. You all have a great day. I'm going to sign off. You're incredible. Thanks for all your support. Have a good day.